And good afternoon. You're listening to Ken Hudnall. This is the Ken Hudnall Show. Coming to you from our studios right here in exciting El Paso, Texas. Gateway to the Old West and the most haunted city in the country. Well, today is October 22nd, 295th day of the year. Just 70 days remain to the year's over with, and we get to start a new year. Well, today is National Nut Day. Savor the delightful crunch of these small protein-packed bites that could add a satisfying twist to snacks. Smart's Cool Day. National Make a Dog's Day. Welcome a loyal companion into your life. Wombat Day. Abu Simbel Festival. Geelong Cup Day. National Color Day. International Caps Lock Day. International Stuttering Awareness Day. If you stutter, be aware of it. Leave a Review Day. Scar Appreciation Day. National Chemistry Week. ACE Week. Raising Understanding and Recognition for Diverse Orientation. A Sexual Awareness fosters inclusivity and validation in society. Seed Gathering Season. Free Speech Week. YWCA Week Without Violence. National Parenting Week. National Health Education Week. National Retirement Security Week. Phuket Vegetarian Festival. Truffle Day in Croatia. Oktoberfest in Blumenau. National Temperature Check Week. National Adoption Week. Digital Parenting Week. Respiratory Care Week. International Infection Prevention Week. National Friends of Libraries Week. National Massage Therapy Awareness Week. National Teen Driver Safety Week. Nuclear Science Week. National School Bus Safety Week. And of course, Map Reading Week. Famous people born this day: Jeff Goldblum, Deontay Wilder, Christopher Lloyd, and Bob Odenkirk. Well, let's see what stories we got in the news. There's always something going on. Well, former CIA chief John Brennan's been accused of perjury over his Russian election testimony. He was one of those that conspired, many say with President Obama, to point the finger at President Trump for being a Russian stooge. Republicans moved to extend Obamacare aid, but reject the Democrats' shutdown gambit. Jon Stewart makes a surprising observation about Trump during a Sanders interview. Sanders says Trump's not stupid to realize the system's broken, even as he makes it worse. Well, according to what Sanders told Jon Stewart, he may be crazy, he may be a pathological liar, but he's not stupid. And Stewart called that comment passive-aggressive, and Sanders was on to say the president correctly highlighted the system as broken, even though he was making it worse. Hillary Clinton fumes as Trump breaks ground on the big, beautiful White House ballroom that he's had people working on since he came to office. Well, U.S. Marshal, an illegal alien shot in Los Angeles immigration operation. The federal agents surrounded and boxed in someone in a vehicle. The driver allegedly rammed federal vehicles in an attempt to escape. That's according to sources within the Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agency and Homeland Security. Federal agents opened fire. One U.S. Marshal was struck in his hand by what initially appeared to be a bullet ricochet. Legal immigrant was struck in the elbow. Both were taken to a hospital and expected to survive. Tuesday's shooting came amid heavy criticism from Los Angeles elected officials over Trump administration's immigration raids in the region. Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass called for a congressional investigation into the alleged unlawful detention of U.S. citizens and immigrants by federal agents. According to her, if you get here, it's a free ride. Well, a girl who fell from a Disney cruise ship was allegedly encouraged by her mother to take a photo in an open porthole. What began as a mother's routine attempt to capture a picture-perfect vacation moment aboard a Disney Cruise Line Disney Dream ended in tragedy. The 5-year-old girl plunged from a deck after being encouraged to climb into an open porthole. Rescue unfolded about 11:30 in the morning, June 29th, on Deck 4 of the Disney Dream ship, while it was in international waters between the Bahamas and Port Everglades in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. According to a news report obtained by Fox 35 Orlando, the family was walking on the fourth deck of the ship when they stopped to take a photo with the daughter. The mother allegedly pointed to a porthole railing, and the daughter climbed on the railing and sat down. Then she lost her balance and fell backward off the rail into the ocean. Well, she fell from deck 4, that's 49 feet from the surface of the water. The girl's mother alerted the husband, who didn't see the incident, but he jumped into the ocean to save his daughter. According to detectives, the 37-year-old father found his daughter, treaded water till they were rescued by Disney Cruise Line rescue personnel on a tender that was launched from the ship. But that will teach her to hang around open portholes. Well, a flight makes an emergency landing after cabin crew was knocking on the cockpit door over a communications issue. SkyWest told Fox Business the aircraft returned to Omaha out of an abundance of caution. The SkyWest Flight 6469 landed safely after returning to Eppley Field in Omaha, Nebraska. That's about 7:45 p.m. local time. They declared an emergency when the pilot could not contact the cabin crew. After landing, it was determined there was a problem with the interphone system, and the flight crew was knocking on the cockpit door. Well, the problem is everybody's, shall we say, a little jumpy these days. Winsome Sears responds to a JMU fan telling her to go back to Haiti after a weekend of leftist infection. She's the Virginia lieutenant governor. She was defiant Monday after her latest brush with racism while she's campaigning for governor on the GOP line. A fan at the James Madison football game yelled at her to go back to Haiti, a black majority country that she does not come from. The incident occurred Saturday during JMU's 63-27 blowout win over Old Dominion in Harrisonburg. Latest episode in which Earl Sears has been targeted with racist invective. Protester recently confronted with a sign suggesting she uses a segregated water fountain. Well, with legacy on the line, Obama is hitting the campaign trail to try to boost Democrats in key governor elections. He's headlining rallies in New Jersey and Virginia, the only two states in the nation to hold gubernatorial contest the year after a presidential election. The election is going to be November 1st. For Democrats are aiming to escape the political wilderness after last year's stunning election setbacks when they lost the White House and Senate majority and fell short of winning back the House. The 2025 ballot box showdowns are their first major shot at redemption. And they hope that the magic of the great God Obama can help them win those two states. Well, the police are giving an update after arresting a man at the airport over a family's shooting warning. A lot of crazy people running around with guns these days. President Trump has ruled out face-to-face talks with President Putin after a productive Rubio call. Well, a pardoned January 6 rioter is accused of threatening to kill Hakeem Jeffries after he was pardoned by President Trump. Christopher Monahan, 34, allegedly sent threatening text messages about an appearance by Jeffries. That's according to a felony complaint filed in New York State Court. According to what the text message said, Hakeem Jeffries makes a speech in a few days in New York City. I cannot allow this terrorist to live. Even if I'm hated, he has to be eliminated. I'll kill him in the future. The recipient of those texts was not identified. Well, the question becomes about these very high-profile robberies, such as the theft from the Louvre. How can those jewels be sold without the thief getting caught? Well, it would probably a private collector is what the belief is. Well, Kohlberg's lawyers say the victim's family's got enough money from GoFundMe donations already. Lawyers for convicted Idaho student murderer Brian Kohlberg have asked a judge to excuse the 30-year-old former criminology PhD student from having to pay roughly $27,000 to two of the four victims' families. They argued that they've already gotten more than enough from donations from people around the country through GoFundMe. Kohlberg had agreed to pay more than $250,000 in criminal fines and fees, plus another $20,000 in civil judgments per family to the parents of Kaylee Goncalves, 21, Madison Mogan, 21, Xander Kernodle, 20, and Ethan Chapin, 20, as part of his plea deal. But his lawyers say he shouldn't have to pay another roughly $20,000 to Goncalves' parents, or nearly $7,000 more to Mogan's mother in travel and accommodation expenses requested by the prosecution. After all, he suffered enough. Well, Mickey Sherrill's classmates are saying that her involvement in the cheating scandal was deeper than she claims. Former classmate of gubernatorial candidate Representative Mickey Sherrill said the New Jersey Democrat is concealing her true involvement in a massive cheating scandal that rocked the U.S. Naval Academy in the 1990s. In an interview with Fox News, Brent Sadler, a Heritage Foundation senior research fellow who's served 26 years in the Navy after graduating from Naval Academy in 1994, suggested that her involvement in the scandal goes a whole lot deeper and she's letting on. He said that to receive the punishment imposed on her, being kept from graduating with a class, she would have had to have lied or obscured the facts at some point. So at some point in time, she lied or she obscured the facts. He thought she probably lied, and that's why she didn't graduate or walk across the stage. Because if you simply didn't report something, that wasn't grounds for an honor code violation at the time. Well, the DOJ is arguing the judge's decision to block Mahmoud Khalil's removal was indefensible. He is an activist, pro-Palestinian, and the lower court is blocking his removal from the country. And the DOJ is saying that decision is fundamentally flawed. DOJ lawyer Drew Inson's arguments came as he faced pointed questions during a hearing from the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Third Circuit in a turbulent, much-long court case centered on non-citizens' constitutional rights. He said the New Jersey District Court that sided with Khalil didn't have proper jurisdiction over Khalil's case, and his habeas corpus petition was not the right vehicle to challenge his detention and removal. Henson said the immigration courts that under the purview of the DOJ were the correct venue. But instead, everybody has jumped to protect this young man. Charlie Kirk assassination is sparking a Senate hearing on left-wing political violence. The Senate Republicans plan to launch a hearing to put political violence from the left under the microscope. Senator Eric Schmidt, Republican of Missouri, plans to announce an upcoming hearing dubbed Political Violent Attacks, a Threat to Our Constitutional Order, to examine the origins of political violence and extremism. He argued stem largely from the Democratic side of the political spectrum. He chairs the Senate Judiciary Committee on the Constitution and plans to hold a hearing on October 28th. He's going to examine the cross-section of the First Amendment and political violence, specifically in the wake of the assassination of conservative activist Charlie Kirk. The left has been on the rampage ever since that time. Well, researchers are now saying that men's brains shrink faster than women's. That's from researchers who explore the Alzheimer connection. Now, they say that even though as men grow older, their brains shrink faster than women's, women are more likely to develop the Alzheimer's disease. This research is published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. They analyzed more than 12,000 brain scans from nearly 5,000 healthy people between the ages of 17 and 95. Each participant had at least 2 MRI scans taken over time, allowing scientists to gauge how their brains changed as they aged. Well, frankly, that makes as much sense as some of the research I've studied in school, one of which I thought was fascinating. Where does your lamp go when you stand up? Nobody could answer that one. Well, China's responded to the U.S.-Australia rare earth deal. The agreement comes after China tightened export controls on rare earths earlier this month. That certainly undercuts China's grip on that particular market. Well, Fetterman is calling out the Democrats' flip, as he calls it. Yes, we ran on killing the filibuster, and now we love it. He is the senator from Democratic senator from Pennsylvania. Though he's talking about leaving the party. He made that remark on Capitol Hill after being asked about his reaction to Republican senator's proposal to nuke the filibuster to force the government to reopen. He said, we ran on that, and we ran on killing the filibuster, and now we love it. I don't want to hear any Democrats clutching their pearls about the filibuster. We'll see if anything comes of that. Well, Bill Nye, the science guy, and Buttigieg, former Treasury Secretary, going to boost Spanberger in the key Virginia city as Jones scandal rooms over the Democratic ticket. Bill Nye, the science guy, is a former PBS host, next Boeing engineer. He's going to join former Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg to headline a rally with Virginia Democratic gubernatorial candidate Abigail Spanberger on Tuesday in the hometown of their party's forefather. They're clutching at any straws they can find. Well, fraternity's been suspended after possible hazing leaves a university student in critical condition. New Jersey fraternity's been suspended following possible hazing after a student was found unresponsive at an off-campus home last week. Police responded to a 911 call at a Alpha Sigma Phi chapter's house at Rutgers University in New Brunswick. Authorities arrived. They found a 19-year-old student unresponsive and transported him to the hospital in critical condition. Well, Rutgers University remains deeply concerned, they said, about the serious incident involving one of our students. University leadership is in close contact with the student's family, offering support during this difficult time. We're hoping for his quick recovery. Well, gas prices are near $3 for the first time in years. See how that goes. Experts are urging President Trump to ban terror-linked UN agency from his Gaza peace deal. Amid the implementation of President Trump's 20-point peace plan to end the Hamas-Israeli war, Middle East experts are urging the United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestine refugees in the Near East, or UNRWA, have no presence in the reconstruction of the Gaza Strip. That's primarily because of its reported support for the terrorist organization Hamas and its track record of severe incompetence. Well, in other news, a 1970s dinner favorite's back on the grocery list. Hamburger Helper. Sales are surging as Americans tighten budgets and look for cheap, filling meals. Well, Jack Nicklaus has been awarded $50 million in a defamation suit after claims he considered a monstrous deal from LIV Golf. He sued Nicholas Companies, his former company, financed by billionaire Howard Milstein for defamation. The 18-time major champion sued the company after it claimed Nicholas was considering a $750 million deal to join LIV Golf and was no longer mentally fit to manage his business affairs. He met with the Saudis in 2021, but said he turned down the offers twice, according to Sports Illustrated. He said, I was offered something in excess of $100 million by the Saudis to do the job probably similar to the one that Greg is doing, he said. I turned it down, once verbally and once in writing. I said, God, does I have to stay with the PGA Tour? I helped start the PGA Tour. The lawsuit said Nicholas had no interest in the offer and declined because he felt the PGA Tour was an important part of his legacy, and the PGA wasn't in favor of the new league. He didn't want to be involved. Well, the jury has spoken. Karine Jean-Pierre, former press secretary for President Biden, has revealed she never thought Kamala Harris was going to win. She, like everybody else in the Biden administration, has come out with a new book. She said, when I woke up, it was over. Harris had lost. I got calls from friends who were distraught or numb with disbelief. But she said she wasn't surprised by the outcome. In truth, she never really thought Harris could win. She'd been in the body of a black woman all her life. She stood at a podium in the White House briefing room and traveled in her chocolate skin through rural towns, and all her experience of blistering stares and racist assumptions left her unable to see this country electing a president who looked like her. Her book is called Independent. Her new book also details her decision to leave the Democratic Party, citing what she believes was a betrayal of former President Joe Biden. She said she felt pessimistic about Harris because of her own experiences in the role, writing she faced misogyny, sexism, and double standards. Well, police have released a photo of a suspect who abandoned a baby with the umbilical cord still attached. The New York Police Department searching for a suspect who was caught on camera allegedly abandoning a baby girl who was found alive at Penn Station in Manhattan on Monday morning. Baby's at Bellevue in stable condition. Investigation's ongoing as officers look for video footage. According to police reports, the infant was discovered about 9:30 in the morning local time on the stairway leading to the southbound number 1, 2, and 3 trains at 34th Street and Penn Station stop. Officials were alerted after an anonymous caller reported seeing the baby left unattended on the steps. When the first responders from the New York Fire Department, New York Police Department arrived and found the baby wrapped in a blanket, conscious and alert, immediately took it to Bellevue. They discovered at that time the umbilical cord was still attached, and she was wrapped only in a sheet, but she was alert and conscious. Well, an attempted murder suspect with 4 prior cases has just walked free on a $9,500 bond after a brutal trail attack. 23-year-old Florida man with a violent criminal record spent 2 months on the run before his capture on charges of rape and attempted murder. But he just walked out of jail after less than 2 days on a ridiculously low bond. According to the Orange County Sheriff's Department, Jacoby Tillman attacked a woman from behind about 8:20 in the morning on July 25th, choked her unconscious on the Little Econ Greenway Trail. He was due in court Tuesday morning for an arraignment where Judge Vincent Chu agreed to the prosecution's motion to revoke bond, reversing a different judge's decision to free him before trial. He'll be transferred to the Orange County Jail after the hearing. But that's typical of the crazy decisions that prosecutors are making these days. Well, in our last story, violent symbolism and threats steal the show at the nationwide No Kings protest. And in spite of what CNN has been saying, there were not millions of people involved. Several now viral social media clips have overshadowed the day's events. In Chicago, a woman whom social media users identified as a K through 8 STEM teacher from the Chicago public school system at Nathan Hale Elementary School in the city was captured on video mocking Charlie Kirk's assassination. She's wearing a gray shirt and holding a Mexican flag. We've seen standing in front of a line of protesters yelling at a truck as it passed by. As the occupants of the truck displayed a pro-Kirk sign, the woman put her pointer and middle finger to her neck, pretended to pull the trigger, yelling bang, bang. And my position would be, if she is so overwhelmed with Mexico, the border is right south of here. I invite you to use it. Well, Stephen Colbert and Karine Jean-Pierre clashed over Biden's mental acuity. According to Karine Jean-Pierre, the president was betrayed. He wasn't losing his faculties. I mean, others disagree, but that's what makes ball games and horse races. Well, on that note, we've ended our news segment. We're going to go to our stories. And, as we did yesterday, we're going to talk about mysteries. Because there's a lot of mysteries out there, folks. You know, one of the biggest is, what was the origin of the COVID-19? Now, even though a mere handful of years has passed since its outbreak, the memories of what the world had to endure during that incident is still shared into the consciousness of most folks. Most first heard about the plague in 2020, even though it technically been around since 2019. That's why it's called COVID-19. The virus is occasionally referred to as the coronavirus because actually that's what it is. This variant of the COVID-19 is in fact just one of the family of coronaviruses. Now, you may not be aware of the term, what the meaning of the term coronavirus, but it's actually a group of viruses known for being able to cross over from one species to another. Viruses are normally species specific. The virus that infects a species of bird doesn't normally harm a species of cat. Germs that make cats ill don't normally harm dogs, nor do they harm humans. But viruses, what they're referred to as the plug-and-play devices of the microscopic world, and are designed to fit perfectly into individual receptors that certain species carry. So for that reason, your pet cat can chew on your used tissue from when you had a cold and be none the worse for wear. Humans might be disgusted at such a sight, but the cat would probably be just fine, since human germs don't normally pass on to the cats, and cat germs don't normally pass to humans. Coronavirus, then, is a rare breakthrough virus that somehow manages to cross species. And since it's rare, you might ask how it came about. Well, that's a bit of a mystery in and of itself. But as far as researchers can tell, it seems that certain viruses can learn to change and modify their shape, so they can not only plug into the cellular receptors of one species, but into the cellular receptors of others as well. Speaking on a more technical level, viruses need to develop very specific proteins that allow them to plug into these receptors. Initially, it was widely believed the coronavirus, or COVID-19, was a coronavirus that had learned this neat little viral magic trick. Believed of maybe a virus from some sort of animal at the meat market in Wuhan, China. These are also known as the wet markets. Been slaughtered by a vendor, and somehow some virus had jumped off the dead and dying beast onto the butcher. The proponents of this theory of origin believe that once our hypothetical butcher was infected, he was able to spread this super virus to everybody he came in contact with. Well, interestingly enough, the marketplaces of Wuhan are frequently visited by tourists from all over the world. And it was theorized that the virus made its way onto these tourists, and as soon as they went home, found its way into their own home countries. Italy had it break out. Canada was hit. Iran. Seemed that there was no stopping this virus once it got started. But the question becomes, in actuality, was it really a coronavirus that jumped from an animal into a human host? Now, we're a few years past the initial outbreak, and a lot of this theory has been called into question. And although those who proposed it have been labeled as conspiracy theorists at the time of the outbreak, the notion that maybe COVID-19 was an artificial virus, maybe created in a lab, has gained some currency. Many were shouted down for even suggesting such a thing in the past, but the glaring fact remained that Wuhan is the home of a major viral laboratory called the Wuhan Institute of Virology. Comedian Jon Stewart famously noted this in one of his later monologues. He also noted how absurd it was that people being shouted down for daring to mention something that should have been rather obvious. Stewart likened the situation to being akin to folks finding a bunch of chocolate next to a chocolate factory only to scratch their head and wonder, where did this chocolate come from? Or as Stewart himself put it, oh my God, there's been an outbreak of chocolatey goodness near Hershey, Pennsylvania. What do you think happened? I don't know. Maybe a steam shovel mated with a cocoa bean. Or maybe it's a chocolate factory. Well, Jon Stewart and a lot of others became absolutely convinced that COVID-19 did indeed come from a Wuhan lab. I mean, that's what he's referring to when he talked about the chocolate factory. In 2023, in fact, U.S. Department of Education even weighed in, making a statement that a leak from a laboratory in Wuhan was the most likely explanation. This powerful department was not basing its assumption on anything, but rather from classified U.S. intelligence reports that it had been privy to. These reports highlighted the reason why this could very well be the case. And you might wonder what the Department of Energy has to do with any of this. Well, they're noteworthy for the fact it's a specific department that keeps tabs on labs both in and outside of the U.S. The Wuhan Institute of Virology, in the meantime, has had a very important job on its hands. It had been tasked with conducting research into the previous coronavirus that had led to the outbreak of SARS in 2003. The lab was trying to find ways to prevent such outbreaks in the future. And it's been theorized that the COVID-19 strain accidentally leaked out in the midst of this experimentation. Well, but at this point in time, though, the debate is still raging. The actual origin of this dreaded respiratory virus that has affected so many people still remains a mystery. Well, let's talk about spidery drones and jellyfish UAPs. Unidentified aerial phenomena, don't you know? That's the politically correct name for UFOs. You know, drone technology has become rather ubiquitous in the 21st century. We don't see them constantly, but we've seen them enough to know what they are. But that wasn't the case a few years ago. It's most certainly wasn't the case in the 1980s when several so-called spidery-shaped drones were spotted spooking and hovering about. Back then, if folks saw a small object hovering in front of them that wasn't a kid's remote-control helicopter, they tended to get a little startled. And as was the case when away with these odd spidery drone sightings first took place back in the 1980s. In regard to the mysterious observations, one witness went on the record to say, as I looked around, I could see this thing. It wasn't attached to the tree. It wasn't in the tree. It was to the side of the tree. Well, today, if we saw a small object hovering by a tree, we might be tempted to shrug it off, and just the latest attempt at the post office to create a viable drone delivery service. But back then, folks simply were not used to seeing a strange, unidentified drone-like object floating around near a tree. That same witness went on to state if it had these elongated wires that stuck out at the top and it just sort of curved, went up and sort of disappeared. Looked like they just sort of faded out. They didn't stop, they just faded out. Well, the person that saw this spidery drone and went on to state that this hovering craft actually looked like something akin to a mechanical dragonfly, with all these mechanical appendages hanging from it. Interestingly enough, one of the latest supposed unidentified aerial phenomena making the rounds is military footage of a jellyfish-shaped object on infrared cameras at a U.S. military installation in Iraq. This object appears to be about the size of a car with mechanical arms dangling down from it. The object has been nicknamed the Ghost of the base. It was entirely invisible to the naked eye and only seen by way of thermal imaging. Although invisible to the naked eye, though, the object was caught on infrared cameras, seemingly conducting some sort of reconnaissance on a U.S. military base. Well, this footage of this jellyfish UAP was officially released in January 2024. Just as puzzling to the average soldier on the base as the supposed spidery drone sightings of yesteryear were to the folks that actually saw them back then. Interesting commonality here, beside the spidery or jellyfish shape of the craft, is the fact that both seem to have the ability to become invisible. The only reason the jellyfish UAP was spotted by way of thermal imaging cameras that it can be seen in the infrared. Otherwise, it would have been entirely invisible to the human eye. Well, coincidentally, or maybe not coincidentally, the spidery drones had this same ability. The same witness, shocked to see one of these drones hovering by a tree, went on to remark about how, as he continued to stare at the object, it suddenly vanished right in front of his eyes. You have to ask yourself what happened. Did somebody forget to press the cloak button, or only to realize humans were watching? Well, it seems that the purpose of this craft was clearly one of covert surveillance. Jellyfish UAP was clearly conducting reconnaissance of a military base, and the spidery drones were watching people, even as they were at least temporarily being watched. The witness had likened this thing to mechanical dragonfly considered this. He said, I know what it feels like to be under surveillance. I have night vision equipment and all this other stuff, and that's what I do. And I felt like this thing was watching me. I had this gut feeling that this thing was either taking pictures of me or was looking at me, scanning, and that was the feeling I had. I just had this feeling this thing knew I was there and it was watching me while I was watching it. 2007, several people came forward with even more reports of spidery drones, and these too also seem to resemble the more recently talked about jellyfish UAPs. One individual by the name of Ty in this report even called it as much. He cited the spidery drone floating around Saratoga, California. He was interviewed by UFO researcher Linda Moulton Howe. In reference to some of the other sightings, he said it had the same weird upside-down jellyfish thing on the top and similar-looking ring structures. What was different here, though, was how much more stuff was on it. Had a ton of different rings, all connected to a big column in the center. I don't have to tell you, this thing is intense to behold. According to some supposed whistleblowers that have surfaced, we average folks aren't supposed to see any of this at all. According to them, these drones are meant to be invisible at all times. The late, great Jim Mars wrote a book called Above Top Secret in 2008 that delved into this topic. He referenced an anonymous informant who went by the name of Isaac. And according to Mars, Isaac went on the record to state that he had worked with similar drone technology in a secret government program called the Commercial Applications Research for Extraterrestrial Technology Program. According to this supposed whistleblower, these types of drones are a result of both human engineering and alien innovation. Under this top secret initiative, recovered alien tech is being reconfigured in the hope of creating breakthrough technology. One of the supposed breakthroughs is that these drones have the ability to be rendered invisible to the human eye. Normally, folks wouldn't be able to see these drones, but according to Isaac, there are occasions when the drones wander too close to radar installations and onboard cloaking capabilities become disrupted. And yes, if you suddenly see a spiderly drone hovering over your backyard out of nowhere, only for it to disappear a split second later, he says it's all the result of a temporary radar disruption. But if humans ever learn how to create miniature drones with the ability to cloak themselves and be rendered invisible, and they learn this from back engineering alien technology, this means alien visitors have had this ability all along. Was that what the footage of the jellyfish UAP spotted over the military base in Iraq was all about? Was it an ET spy checking in on us warring humans at one of the bloodiest conflict zones in the Middle East? Folks on the internet have endlessly scoured over the alleged footage ever since it was released early in 2024 and have come to some startling conclusions. One Redditor even blew up the image and made a sketch of what he thought he saw. The image itself, being a grainy thermal image, takes some imagination, but this particular Redditor certainly had plenty of imagination. He sketched what looked like a spiderly drone with a classic gray alien on top of it, piloting as if it was his own personal hovercraft. Like a Rorschach's test in real time, jellyfish blob suddenly began to make a whole lot of sense. Or as another Redditor said at the time, once you see it, you can't unsee it. Some even claimed as if this thing is seen spookily floating through the base, they can see the gray alien slightly turn its head toward the infrared camera that was filming it. So I guess the question becomes, are we being monitored by aliens who ride around on invisible mechanical jellyfish-like craft? Or has our own government made its own version of these spidery vehicles? Well, I guess the question is, what's the truth? Will the mysteries ever cease? Well, frankly, there are a lot of people that say without the mystery, life would be a whole lot less fun. Well, let's talk about the Ark of the Covenant, also known as the power of God. Well, this mystery is an ancient mystery. The tale of the Ark of the Covenant dates back to the ancient Hebrews thousands of years ago. According to the Bible, the Hebrews were instructed to build a wooden gold-plated box with a very specific design. You might ask, why? Well, it was so that the presence of God could manifest, of course. Christians and non-Christians alike probably skim over such biblical mentions, not giving it a whole lot of thought. I mean, let's face it, folks, God manifesting in a box. Well, let's move on to the story about the giant boat, or maybe the parting of the Red Sea. I mean, that would tend to make a whole lot more sense. But even though we become largely desensitized to some of the most incredible supernatural claims the Bible has to offer, we really ought to give it some thought. We can realize how stunning such an assertion is. The Bible insists that the God that created the universe and which must somehow exist outside of time and space, instructed a group of people to make a very specific contraption so his presence could somehow manifest in it. And as absurd as this might look at first glance, it actually makes a whole lot of sense. If God is actually outside of time and space, it stands to reason he wouldn't be able to just drop down on his creation out of nowhere. It'd be like a painter who paints a beautiful painting suddenly hopping into the painting himself. It's kind of hard to do so since the painter's made of flesh and blood and not paint. The painter's also three-dimensional, so how could he certainly insert himself into a two-dimensional painted canvas? Well, since God is outside of space and time, he likely had to find various ways to manifest from the outside. And the scripture seems to back that up. The story of the Ark of the Covenant is certainly one that fully supports this premise. According to the Bible, this ark was constructed in a very specific parameter so that God could manifest and actively make a covenant with his people. It says this wooden box was built to be around 3 feet 9 inches in length, about 2 feet 3 inches high, made out of acacia wood, covered in gold plating. 4 corners of the box also had golden rings fastened around them. And these rings were very important since wooden poles were slid through the rings so that the ark could be carried. Otherwise, once God began to manifest inside the ark, it said by merely brushing against it, whoever did that would fall over dead. And so it was that for the safety of those around the ark, they were always directed to carry it by way of these wooden poles inserted inside the gold rings attached to it. And the box was covered by a golden lid designed with 2 sculpted cherubs, which are special angelic protectors on the surface of it. The cherubs face each other with their wings spread out as if they're trying to cover the ark with them. The Bible states that the voice of God could be heard speaking from within these 2 cherubs, or cherubim as they were called. While communicating to his followers, the ark could also wield God's power. And there are several instances in Scripture of how the ark helped the Hebrews people win battles. According to Scripture, it seemed that the ark truly gave those who carried it an edge in any battle. This wasn't always the case because the Hebrews were eventually defeated by their rivals, the Philistines. And the Philistines eventually captured the ark. But they didn't keep it for long before rumblings from the ark set fear into their hearts. It said they were beset with multiple misfortunes such as the eruption of plagues and other pestilence. You might call them superstitious, but the Philistines blamed these happenings on the ark. And they were so thoroughly convinced they were set out to get rid of it. They tied it to a couple of cattle and sent them running in the other direction. Well, in this manner, the Hebrews were able to recover the ark. And the ark would mysteriously disappear again, however, when the Babylonians crushed Israel and destroyed Solomon's famed temple. Some believe the ark was either taken or destroyed. Others, however, believe that prior to that disaster, the ark was already relocated to a much more remote place. The ark, in fact, is said to have been taken all the way to Ethiopia. Solomon himself had connections to Ethiopia through the famed Queen of Sheba. According to legend, the Ethiopian queen visited Solomon and the two had a love affair that produced a son by the name of Menelik. It's widely believed among Ethiopians that this is the source of their Jewish ancestry. The so-called Solomonic line is also what the kingship of Ethiopian emperors was based on. The last Ethiopian emperor, in fact, was the great Haile Selassie, laying from 1930 to 1934. If he knew anything about the final location of the ark, he never said. Spent his last days imprisoned by communist revolutionaries when dictator Mengistu Haile Mariam seized control of Ethiopia in a military coup. According to legend, though, the ark was actually taken to a monastery in the northern Ethiopian city of Axum. It said the location of the ark is only known by a secret group of initiates who guard both the actual ark and its secrets with their lives. Well, according to the Bible, the ark helped guide the Hebrew people to their promised land. And many insist that this box, the Ark of the Covenant, is real, and if it still exists, whether in Ethiopia or someplace else, a lot of folks believe the mysterious ark and its incredible power is still hidden away someplace. Another story is that beneath the location of the Temple of Solomon were tunnels and hiding places where the ark was taken to when the city was overrun. There are believers in both stories. Well, there's another mystery that, in fact, there's representative samples of that mystery in this country. And I'm talking about the ancient burial mounds scattered all over the world. They're not just piles of dirt. Most feature some rather intricate layouts, more like a massive complex on a dirt pile. The mounds themselves seem to gain the most attention when they were discovered in America. Late 1700s, at many of these structures in North America began to be thoroughly investigated. Investigators are impressed by their elaborate nature, and some even insisted that some of the mounds were so elaborate they were more akin to pyramids and temples than just burial mounds. Even more interesting, though, were the mounds forged into the shape of animals. One of the most intriguing being the so-called serpent mound. It's a mound made in the shape of a writhing serpent. It stretches for a quarter of a mile. Mounds in the vicinity of modern-day Peebles, Ohio, located in the southeast section of the state. The mound became an increasingly curious sight as settlers poured into that region in the 1800s. And a lot of theories began to take shape as to how and why this strange, elaborate burial mound is put where in the place it's at. Other parts of the country, in the meantime, more mysterious mounds are being uncovered. In St. Louis, a giant mound that looked almost like an Egyptian pyramid was found. Sighting of such an impressive structure naturally made the settlers curious as to who might have built it. Interestingly enough, the local Native Americans who still live in that region insisted it was built by a group of people a very long time ago, who had long since left. And if that's true, who were these mysterious mound builders? That was a question the amateur archaeologist William Pidgeon had, and he wanted to get an answer. He lived in the Ohio region during the first half of the 19th century, and he was fascinated by these burial mounds. Also intrigued by the notion that whoever built them might have been part of some lost and unknown civilization. During the 1830s, Mr. Pidgeon discovered what he hailed as some sort of proof that European visitors had reached the Americas in a distant past, long before Columbus. He's come to believe that it was, in fact, Europeans who had something to do with the burial mounds. On a bluff near Ohio's Little Miami River, this man came on a huge mound that the locals have called the Fort Ancient. It's a massive complex, and Pidgeon was sure it was made by some sort of ancient civilization that had been built by ancient Europeans in a distant past. In his quest to find answers, he eventually made his way across the Great Lakes, visited local tribes that lived in the region. He conducted extensive interviews with tribal members about the mounds that he had come in contact with so far. During these interview sessions, he befriended a tribal elder known as Dekuda. And it was Dekuda who filled Pidgeon in on tribal lore surrounding the mounds. This elder informed him it was in ancient times that the gods came to earth and built these structures. Pidgeon, who was still convinced that some of the lost European civilization had come in and built the mounds, was now being told that the visitors had hailed from even further afield than he thought. They'd come from the heavens. It's listening to accounts like these that the mystery of the mound suddenly intersects with another mystery, that of ancient tribe of giants that seemed to supposedly occupied this country. The Kuda's account is very much reminiscent of many other variations of Native American lore, which speaks of a powerful group of humanoids who came from the skies in a distant past. It said these giants were nearly as tall as trees, and with their tremendous superhuman strength, they built massive temples and surrounding complexes that ultimately included burial mounds. Another investigator, Cyrus Thomas, who served as a kind of anthropologist in the region, once easily sold. He thought the explanation of godlike ancient mound builders was seriously flawed. He studied the mounds and believed it was simply the ancestors of the local Native Americans who still inhabited that region who built the structures. He conducted a lot of interviews with the locals and backed up this testimony with archaeology, a systematic approach that is still relied on to this day. Although there's still some debate on the subject, a lot of folks believe the mystery of the mound builders needs to be solved and attribute them to local and past Native Americans who hail from the categorized Native American cultures of the Mississippian, the Hopewell, and the Adena. Well, the Adena culture in particular is said to have flourished in the Midwest from 1000 BC to about 200 AD. This culture is said to have constructed extensive burial mounds, maybe even the Great Serpent Mound in Ohio. Well, the Hopewell culture, on the other hand, is the successor of the Adena, which was dominant from 200 AD to 550 AD. It's believed that these Native Americans continued this trend. This culture is then followed by the Mississippians, which dominated from 600 AD to about 1600 AD, right when Europeans were first reaching the Americas. So does this mean the mystery solved? Well, not really. There's still a lot of questions about these mysterious mounds that are still unanswered. But we're going to talk about another question I've heard put forward a number of times. Is the moon artificial? This very notion, of course, strikes a lot of us as kind of absurd. How could the moon be an artificial structure? Considering the centuries of ground-based observation, as well as the robotic and manned moon missions that have taken place over the last 100 years, such a reaction might be understandable. You could be forgiven for thinking we already have an in-depth understanding of the moon, but quite frankly, this is not necessarily the case. As it pertains to the moon, there's still a lot we simply don't know. Even an understanding of how the moon came to orbit the Earth is nothing more than a theory. Scientists currently think the moon was produced when an almost planet-sized object struck the Earth a few billion years ago. It's been proposed that material from both the ancient Earth and the other huge planetoid coalesced into a ring of debris around the rest of the Earth that eventually formed what we now casually refer to as the moon. Those who propose this theory could be right, but at the same time, even what's viewed as the best likely theory is still just a theory. And as it stands, we still don't really know exactly how the moon suddenly appeared in the skies over Earth. Making matters even more intriguing are a lot of ancient legends from the Greeks and the Babylonians to the Native Americans in regards to some distant dark age in man's prehistory when there was no moon. Well, if that's true, such a thing would indeed rewrite the history books. It'd mean that rather than some cataclysmic collision creating the moon through natural, although apocalyptic means a few billion years ago, the moon appeared much more recently, some say as recently as 100,000 years ago, and its sudden appearance was noted by early humans, even passed down in ancestral legends. Apollo astronauts, in the meantime, who actually landed on the moon and brought back rocks from its surface, created another mystery, because certain parts of the moon appear to be a lot older than the Earth, and according to some, older than even our closest star, the Sun. And for those who suggest the moon resulted from a collision that occurred a few billion years ago, this creates some problems. I mean, it's not necessarily a deal breaker for the planetoid collision theory, but it does change things considerably. If some of the moon rocks are older than the Earth, the only viable explanation still supporting the collision theory would be that whatever that planetoid was, it had to have been much older than the Earth itself. And if it was even older than the Sun itself, that means it wasn't even from our stellar neighborhood to begin with, but came from outside the solar system. And then, of course, you have to wonder how in the heck that ancient planetoid came hurtling into our solar system in order to hit the Earth similar to a billiard ball. But if you allow yourself to get into really far-fetched theory, there are conspiracy theorists and like you have you believe that they have all the answers to these interesting little oddities. There's a theory that the moon is artificial in origin, actually an ancient space station that could very well be older than our entire solar system. According to this theory, the moon station was sent here for observational purposes, not billions of years ago, but some point in humanity's prehistory, with the express purpose of keeping watch on humanity itself. The sign in the sky was allegedly sent over here by an incredibly old extraterrestrial civilization to keep tabs on human progress. Well, if they're here spying on us, they got to be scratching their head at some of the craziness that we're doing. You know, the oddness of the moon's age, coupled with stories about ancestral legends, are weird enough, but that's nothing in comparison with the odd physical features of the moon itself. And the Apollo astronauts learned something about this firsthand. Folks had often wondered what the moon was made of prior to the Apollo missions. I've heard stories about the moon being made of everything from sandy moon dust to having the consistency of Swiss cheese. I even heard green cheese. Well, the Apollo astronauts didn't find any cheese on the moon, but the consistency of moon rocks was strange enough. They were found to be magnetized. Well, on that note, we've come to the end of today's show. We'll be back tomorrow, and once again, we'll be talking about unsolved mysteries. Till then, Ken Hudnall for the Ken Hudnall Show, saying have a truly great evening.